Tēnā koutou katoa no ingarane oku tupuna ko aorangi te whenua tupu kei pito onia hau e noho ana ko Anne Godfrey tōku ingoa. Tēnā tātou katoa. Here we are at Waitangi Day, a day when we consider the history of our country, and specifically the day when the first people signed the Treaty of Waitangi. Why does that matter when it was so long ago? Firstly, the Bible affirms the importance of history as it relates to the dealings of God and the human population over time. There are many stories where we're expected to learn from history of things going wrong. At the beginning of Luke's Gospel, Luke explains how it was important for him to research and check out the facts so that he could put together an orderly account of Jesus' life and ministry. Secondly, there is the saying, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Although some of us were brought up with the idea that the treaty was our founding document that led to Māori and Pākehā living together happily ever after, we now know that it was followed by misunderstanding, greed and violence that resulted in one party ending up much worse off than the other. I've been reading the book Land by the prolific British writer Simon Winchester. It covers a whole huge amount of history about the battle for land all around our planet, and one of the chapters is about New Zealand. Winchester, as I said, a Brit, says this about the Treaty of Waitangi. One of the many failings of the British Empire was the often bovine inability of Britons to even try to understand the subtleties and nuances of another and unfamiliar people. The Maori chiefs assembled at Waitangi, studying the translated text that was presented to them, could have no notion whatsoever of sovereignty, nor could they fathom what the rights of British subjects might be, since they had no certain idea of what or where Britain was. As for phrases like the full, exclusive and undisturbed possession of lands, to a Māori, the concept of individual land possession simply did not compute. It's not surprising that conflict followed as a flood of Pākehā settlers looked for land. And over the next years, Māori became a minority in their own country, losing their land as a result of wars, confiscation and dodgy dealing. As a result, Winchester writes, as recently as the 1970s, there was little doubt about New Zealand's identity. Everything about the place blared forth the notion that this was an indubitably and self-consciously British place, preserved in 1950s amber and set down comfortably in the southern seas. It was a place of daffodils and lawn bowls and afternoon tea, country constables on bicycles and cavalry twill and marmite and well-attended Anglican churches. The nation's anthem was God Save the Queen. In the short space of 50 years since, much has changed. The history lessons I had in school were about European history. When I went to university, there was history, which again was European history, and then New Zealand history as a separate subject. I chose history, so I learned very little about the country I live in. At high school, when it came to language options, there was French, German and Latin, no te reo Māori. So 50 years later, I've been filling in some of the gaps in my education by studying te reo Māori, and as a part of that I've been exploring my whakapapa, my family history. I spent some time last year researching when and how and why my ancestors came to Aotearoa. What I found out was this. On Christmas Eve, 1873, the sailing ship Scimitar left Plymouth in England with 430 immigrants on board. 15 of those immigrants were a family group of my great-great-grandparents, Henry and Elizabeth Dew, and some of their children and grandchildren. It took the ship 71 days to reach Port Chalmers, and on the way, many of the passengers were sick with measles, scarlatina, bronchitis, severe diarrhea, and 26 children died, including the 2-year-old in my family. In summary, coming to New Zealand was no picnic. I don't have any specific information on why the Dew family emigrated, but general information about the 1870s shows there'd been a long-term decline in rural wages and conditions, which would have affected farm labourers like my great-grandfather. At the same time, the New Zealand government was offering free trips to New Zealand to increase the population and settle on land purchased and confiscated from Maori. So, to the Dew family, it must have seemed like a good deal. 1874 was the biggest year for immigration until 2002, with 38,000 immigrants arriving in the country. The Dew family went and settled in Invercargill, which at the time had a population of less than 2,500, just a small town. The government was encouraging settlement of the South Island, and somewhere I read this was because there were fewer Māori there. Henry Dew worked as a labourer, helping to build Tay Street and D Street, the two main streets of Invercargill. I wonder, what was the impact of the arrival of 38,000 immigrants in 1 year on Māori? What did they think about it? And of course, the 38,000 didn't stay there, they spread and multiplied. This book is a family tree researched by my great uncle 100 years later in the 1970s, and there are pages and pages of the Dew's descendants. And in recent years, there's been much more exploration of our history, so there are lots of ways we can find out more. Another book I've been reading lately is Tikanga by Māori educator Kere Opai. He says, what I would recommend is education around the true history of this country, warts and all. For most of my lifetime, it has felt like there's been a reticence, a reserve about learning the actual history of the colonisation of Aotearoa, as if it was a can of worms no one wanted to open. I think the time's come when there's a groundswell of determination to really explore it. Who knows, it might bring us together and progress us towards a better bicultural society. I think he's right. The time has come. I'm so pleased that future generations will learn more of our history at school than I did. For the rest of us, there are many opportunities to explore our history through reading, study, TV programs, internet research and so on. Let's take them. To conclude with a whakatauki, te manu kai miro, no nā te ngahere, te manu kai mātauranga, no nā te ao. The bird that eats the miro berries, theirs is the forest. The bird that consumes knowledge, the wood.
Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa I tēnei rā nui. Te rā whakamaumahara o te tiriti o Waitangi. Ko tangata tiriti aho, ko Karen Taku Ingoa. All stories have a beginning, a middle and an end. In a broad sense, the story of God and people in the Bible is made up of 3 parts: creation, fall and redemption. We've been talking about gospel renewal over the summer, and the word renewal is that 3rd part of God's story, the redemption part of creation, fall and redemption. In short, this story tells us how God intended for it to be in the beginning, how things have gone wrong, and how God is restoring all things. When we hold up the history of Aotearoa New Zealand alongside God's story, what do we see? What part of God's story are we now living in? And where is history heading? In the creation part of the Aotearoa story, we see that before the arrival of people, God has been in our land from the beginning. Birds, fish, trees, wind, sun, oceans, and rivers were created in an interdependent ecosystem that reflected the dance of the Trinity, the very nature of God in relationship with God's self. God made a special place for the people of the land to live within this ecosystem, to live in balance with the land and give it names like Aotearoa, Tui, Tōtara, and Kahawai. In Aotearoa, we can see evidence of the fall also. The fall involved people stepping out of a state of shalom or right relationship with themselves, other people, God, and the earth. The story of colonisation, which has a long history that predates its arrival in New Zealand, is part of our fallen condition. In Aotearoa, we can see the impact of viewing people and nature as resources for economic growth. All stories have characters or roles, like a villain or the hero, the damsel in distress, played out by actors. The time and history we are born into determines the roles we get cast into at birth. We live out the story, and the story lives us. So what is this colonisation story we have been born into, and how does it affect us? Colonisation reduces everyone to something less than what God intended. The story of colonisation casts people groups into unhealthy roles: persecutor, victim, and rescuer. When we view ourselves or each other as taking up one of these roles, we get caught up in cycles of violence and disempowerment. The story of colonisation continues to do this today as these patterns of relating are reinforced over time and keep us stuck. Any restoration work we do needs to move away from these roles and towards something else. But what is the something else that we're aiming for? I have two alternative triangles for us to consider. The first one, from Pa Henare Tate, a Māori Catholic, in his book He Puna Iti Ao Marama, offers us an Indigenous, pre-Christian spiritual framework of Māori spirituality. You can see the triangle shape with the relationship between atua, tangata, and whenua. He says that atua is the source of all aroha and mana. The aroha of God, people, and land flow into each other to enhance the flow of aroha or love within the whole system. When we view each other in this way, we see that all people are filled with aroha and mana. People are connected to people and land so that how we treat people, God, and land in turn enhances or violates our own mana. And from the Christian perspective, we have another triangle, the dance of the Trinity. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The dancers are equally empowered, they are distinct, they are respectful, making space for each other on the dance floor. Both of these triangles remind me of the beginning of the story. They help us to look back so that we can look forward. Both offer us a framework for restoration. God's restoration work in the world also includes covenant relationships. In Aotearoa, we are lucky to have a covenant, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and the Treaty of Waitangi to help us in the work of renewal. We could view our treaty as a dance between two treaty partners. The dance of partnership between Māori and Pākehā has been a broken dance, but our hope lies in being able to restore this partnership dance and learn to do it well together. In the renewed dance, we will see the aroha and mana of atua within each other. A renewed dance will be empowering, respectful, a dance where Māori and Pākehā have space to dance, to express who they really are and celebrate each other. So how do we move forward? Some people would say just focus on the positives. Well, this is understandable because it's painful to face all that has been lost and taken. Firstly, we have to recognise that the dance is broken. We are not at the time of creation when all was as God intended, and we have not yet arrived at the restoration of all things. We are in the time of redeeming, but we are not there yet. This means admitting that we are not in control of the dance. We didn't choose the music or the speed. The dance we are in now gives more power to one dance partner and has caused harm. This means rediscovering who we are and where we are from, looking into our own history, how all of us came to New Zealand, and what we have lost of who we are. Language, song, connection with the land of our ancestors. It means doing something different. For me, it has meant becoming a learner, making many mistakes. The more I learn, the more mistakes I can see myself make, and this is excruciating. When I was 20, I bravely spoke in Māori when I led worship at church. A Māori friend of mine came up to me after and said, "Don't ever do that again, it makes me so uncomfortable." I was not able to have the conversation that was needed in this moment. I didn't cope well. It paralysed me with fear and caused me to stop trying to be a treaty partner. Sometimes what we think is a good idea is not seen that way by our treaty dance partners. Sometimes we are doing even more harm. Changing how things are done can create a shock response, even when it is a step in the right direction, because we are not used to the new dance. In our attempt to do the dance better, we can end up tripping each other over. It is necessary to have some difficult and painful conversations. Turning up to these conversations is part of the work of restoration. Owning our wrongdoing, allowing space for pain to be expressed and cared for, and examining our own intentions and motives are all part of the work to restore the treaty partnership so that we can do the dance better. Our first steps will be awkward. Like an infant learning to walk, we will stagger and fall before we become proficient. There are many mistakes that I've made, which we don't have time to explore today. And through these mistakes, I'm starting to develop a sensitivity to when it is appropriate for Pākehā to lead and when to let Māori lead. And not get caught up in the trap of either taking up all the space on the dance floor or expecting Māori to do all of the dancing for me and carry me. The dance involves two partners who both have to contribute. We need to be careful of not pulling or dragging or pushing each other around, and also not letting go either. There is a sensitivity that needs to be developed in this. As a Baptist church movement in New Zealand, we were pretty late acknowledging the treaty compared to other denominations. Joan Milner was sent from Wellington to Waikato to establish Baptist Māori ministries, and Joan only died just a few years ago. The early steps of this ministry was a mercy-based model where Pākehā ministered to Māori. Before Joan's death, David Moko picked up this ministry, pulled a team together of Māori leaders around him, who it was handed over to last year. Now called Te Kaparotiraki, it is now Māori-led ministry for Māori. The evolution of a ministry model over time, like this, is encouraging and shows us what is possible when balance in the dance is restored. Some of us were part of their hui whakarongo at PBC last year, a research project into the experience of Māori in Baptist churches. Kerry Baptist College has started delivering a diploma in Māori leadership. This is very good news. Last year, Glenn and I met with Mike Ross to explore how we can do the treaty partnership better as a church family at PBC. It would be great for you to talk about this in your house churches and post your ideas to PBC Connect. We have a forum coming up soon to discuss this further. Recently, I investigated my own roots and found that is a beautiful Gaelic blessing that maybe some of my ancestors would have said. I'll leave this with you to finish. Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. Deep peace of the gentle night to you. Moon and stars pour their healing light on you. Deep peace of Christ, the light of the world to you. Deep peace of Christ to you. Kia ora.